First and foremost, I want to introduce anyone who's not familiar with my guest today to Ben Lowe, all the way from the wonderful land down under, the land of Australia. So, Ben, I want to take a moment just to thank you for agreeing to come on and have the conversation with me.
Man, I'm absolutely stoked to be here, Steve. And obviously, we've only been in chats for literally a couple of days, bro. But when I see what you're doing with obviously trying to share stories and trying to help so many others, man, I'm more than happy to jump on and have a yarn and hopefully use my story to help someone that might be out there struggling and give them some hope.
Your story is one that I don't think I fully understood until 10, 15 minutes prior to us entering the studio. And I thought I was excited about having you on before, but I am even more excited to have you on now. And so, Ben, your bio on Instagram says that you're seeking to help high achieving men overcome self sabotage without spending the countless hours in therapy. And we were talking off camera, and you described how your journey with that began with your own story and with your own personal experience. So, walk me through how you have experienced this in your own life.
Oh, man. High level, high level, high level. I grew up in a pretty normal, pretty standard family. Growing up, a lot of the other kids thought we were quite wealthy, thought we had it quite well. Like I grew up in a nice house in a nice town, went to good schools. Like from the outside looking in, life was, I guess, what you call picture perfect, or at least what we thought picture perfect was, right? And, things going along, I was, not really ever very engaged at school. I wasn't very sporty. So I was one of those kids that sort of just got by. A bit of an outsider, a bit of a misfit, if you like. Cruising along. I never really struggled to make friends or anything, but I was one of those kids that would just drift from group to group. Never really feeling like I fit in. And I felt that from a very, very young age. I always felt like I was a bit of a misfit. And, you know, 13 years old was probably the biggest pivotal moment that I can remember in my life where things really took a turn for the worst. And so my parents decided they were getting a divorce. I remember we were standing out next to the pool at my house. My mum was there, my sister was there, my dad was over in Indonesia because he was doing work trips at the time. And mum said to me that, Dad, your father and I were getting a divorce.
Mm,
I remember just having this overwhelming sense of emotion, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I looked at my sister and she just started bawling in tears, right? And
mm,
she looked at mum and said, "Why would he do that? Why would dad do that to us?" And the first thing that came out of my mouth, and I made this story my reality, was because he doesn't love us anymore. And so from 13 years old, I took that story throughout my life that my father didn't love me and that I was unlovable, right? I also learned at 13 years old that the easiest way for me to deal with my problems was alcohol. I was drinking, I was partying, I was hanging out with friends that were doing the same. I always hung out with like kids that are a lot older, and a lot of them would be stealing alcohol from their parents and would, go to the skate park on the weekend and would drink or we'd, sneak out of home on the weekend and we'd take a couple of cans from the fridge or whatever it might be. And yeah, obviously with everything going on in my life at that time, like my parents had zero emotional intelligence. My dad was very closed off. My mum was very highly anxious. So it was like polar opposites, just like the typical dynamic you'll see play out in a lot of relationships, like the anxious avoidance sort of attachment styles. Obviously growing up seeing that, I never really learned about emotion or what they were. And watching my dad just shut himself down, it taught me to do the same. And so once again, learning at a very young age of 13 that alcohol was the easiest way for me to shut off from the world, that became a vice and it became a vice very, very quickly. So every chance that I could get, I'd be partying, I'd be out on weekends, I'd be taking sips of, whatever might be in the cupboard from my mum's house. My parents had split up, same at my dad's house. And he always had a couple of bottles of scotch around, right? So I'd always take a little bit here, take a little bit there. I'd maybe drink at school some days. It was getting out of control. And there was also a part of that, right? Once again, never being the kid that fit in where I'd take alcohol to school and get drunk at school because I thought it made me cool, right? And I thought it would make me fit in more. And so I was looking for that validation by doing crazy things. And I think about it now, right? Thinking back and just about how much of my life I was doing other things, like obviously, trying to push myself above and beyond just to get validation from other people. I wasn't even really doing it for myself. And fast forward a couple of years, man. Fast forward a couple of years, 15 years old. I've been, obviously partying a lot, not really listening to what my parents were saying, not really abiding by what they wanted me to do. My mum was a school teacher. My dad was a business owner. And so my mum would always, she really didn't know how to separate home life and work life. And so it was like having a teacher full time at home, but not just any teacher. Like the nickname that they gave my mum, because sometimes she'd actually teach at the same school that I was at. The nickname they gave my mum was the Dragon Lady. So you can just imagine what that was like. And it was literally no different at home. It was always just everything was around having to get an education, doing this, doing that. We never actually really had a mum that was just there and nurturing and loving. And I know that it came from a place of love for her because one of her highest values is obviously education. However, that then also took away from the love that me and my sister needed to get and actually getting that from her. And so, again, like I said, fast forward to 15 years old. And I'm pretty sure at this point in time, it was either just before or just after, but my mum had been away overseas. And so I kicked the door into the house and had a massive house party. So I was meant to be at my dad's house, told him I was going to stay at a friend's house. I kicked the door in, had a massive house party, just real shit behavior as a kid. But I'm sure that most kids do this, right? They have a party at their parents' house while the parents are away. Of course, every time something goes wrong, right? So there was a couple of things that got stolen because we had people there that I didn't even know, older boys that some of the girls from my school were hanging around. And I remember coming home after I'd been away and my mum was trying to chase me down to be like, what happened? What have you done? This and that. Everything else was going on. And she was like, look, I'm had it. I'm done. I've had it up to here with your shit. You either follow my rules or you can move out. Now, if you'd asked me at that time, I played the victim. I told everyone else around me that my mum had kicked me out, right? But she gave me an ultimatum and I pretty much said that I don't want to follow the rules. And so I had to move out. And it was the same with my dad. So 15 years old, I moved out of home for the first time. And I was going to school. I was also working at McDonald's with my first job. So I worked at McDonald's from 13 till 16. And some of the guys I was hanging around at McDonald's were smoking weed out the back one day. So I thought, well, cool, let's give that a go. That seems cool. And I've been like, obviously growing up in a very, very sheltered family. I've been so anti-drug my whole life. I'm never going to touch drugs. I'm never going to do this. Yeah, here we are, 15 years old, just moved out of home. And I'm like, well, I'm going to try what they're doing because I wanted to fit in once again. I was trying to fit in. So I started smoking weed. But the thing is, Stephen, I always had an entrepreneur's mindset, right? So the same day that I started smoking weed was also the same day that I started selling it. So the first time that I ever bought any weed for myself, I bought an ounce and I made it up into 25 lots and I was selling it. I wanted to make some money from it. I'm like, I'm not going to pay for this unless I can make money off it. And so working at McDonald's, selling weed out the back door of McDonald's, still trying to go to school. And I got really, really sick, like really sick. Like I'm talking like glandular fever, like couldn't get out of bed sick. But obviously I'm living out of home. I have to get up and go to work. And so something had to give. I thought to myself, well, selling drugs is making me money. That's going to allow me to keep living. Going to work is also a big part of how I am selling the drugs, but also make me money. That's something I need to make work as well. However, school at this point in time, I was in year 11 going into year 12, so final year of school. And they calculated the amount of days I'd actually been there because of being sick and obviously wagging school and everything like that. And I think it calculated to like 4 or 5 days in the first term of school. So I said, you know what? Maybe school isn't for me. I went full time into working at McDonald's and selling drugs. So not long after this, I did move back into home because once again, like I said, I got really, really sick and I realized maybe this living out of home thing isn't for me just yet. So I started following the rules a little bit. I made up with my parents to some degree, but there's still a lot of tension there. And the problem was that now I had a drug habit, right? So I wasn't just drinking, I was taking drugs as well. And so my whole day consisted of either going to work at McDonald's or smoking bongs in my bedroom. And I treated my parents like they were absolutely stupid. Still just thought they had no idea. And I remember multiple times dad would be like, you're smoking something in your room. I can smell it. And I told him, no, you're off your head. I don't know what you're talking about. And I treated him like he was a dickhead, like he had no idea. Same with my mum. Remember, she found a bong of mine and she asked me what it was. And she's very naive. Like put it this way, I was an eye opener for her. She asked me what it was. And I said, it's smoking flavored tobacco. Yet here I am smoking bongs in the shower at home at her house when I'm there. Right. But I think at the end of the day, I think she had an idea, but she just didn't want to see me leave the house again. She didn't want to see me go out on the streets and be by myself. So I sort of, I get it. Poor old mum, right? lovely lady, by the way, but just so sheltered. 16 years old, I remember very vividly, okay? I was once again sitting at home, smoking bongs, and I was meant to be getting up and getting ready to go to work. And I thought to myself, I'm actually losing money by being at work. I'm actually making more money by staying at home and smoking bongs because people will come and see me and I'll sell some weed to them.
Mm,
So at that point in time, I decided that I was going to become a drug dealer full time. And from 16 through till 26, through till about actually 30, so 16 through till about 30, my whole life literally revolved around the drug trade. So obviously it graduates a little bit further than that though. So weed from 16 till 18, 18 years old, I was introduced to crystal meth. Now, how it happened was I was going to see my normal guy that I'd get my weed off, and he was a bit older. And like I said, I used to party with the older guys. I used to hang out with the older guys. And once again, here's me trying to fit in. And so I see them passing around a glass pipe when I'm there trying to get my weed. And I'm like, what's that? And a friend of mine that I was with was like, oh man, they're smoking ice. And I was like, okay, what's that? I really hadn't, I heard of it, but I didn't exactly know what it was. Ice, crystal meth, whatever you want to call it. Either way, he was like, yeah, have you ever tried it, man? It's crazy. Like the feeling you get is intense. It's the best thing you'll ever have. And I was a little bit scared. There was like a little bit of skepticism there. I'm like, do I really want to make this jump from being in something like weed to then like going to really, really hard drugs? And I remember the guy that was there as well, the guy that was my mate, if you like. He looked at me, he goes, if you want to try it, you can try it. But one thing I'll tell you is that your life will never be the same.
mm,
And I can tell you, and every single person listening, for anyone that hasn't tried meth, please don't, because he was 100% right. So very quickly, my life graduated from selling weed to selling meth, and now my whole life revolved around crystal meth. So same deal. The first time that I smoked it was also the first time that I bought an amount of it that I could sell to make money off because I knew lots of people that would want this. And from 18 till 20, my life looked like something that you see out of a movie, not like the happy ending kind of movies, but I'm talking like Rise of the Foot Soldier, like Green Street Hooligans, like these kinds of movies. Yeah.
right.
And
Yep.
I don't say that lightly. Like there was some moments where it was real touch and go for me. Um, 20 years old, I went to prison for the first time and not for anything too crazy either. See, the thing is with meth, and for anyone that hasn't tried it, like I said, please don't, but you lose all sense of time. And there was, when I was 15 or 16 years, I think I was 16 years old, I'd actually been charged for 54 break and enters. So obviously with the drug trade came the crime as well, because I wasn't the greatest drug dealer. I'd smoke a lot more than I'd sell. And so I'd always have to try and come up with money to, you know, to get my drugs. And so there was one night that I was at a house party when I was 16 years old. And me and a friend of mine went and broke into houses, broke into cars, and just took anything that wasn't bolted down to try and sell it. And I got caught. I got caught. The people at the party recognized what we were doing and actually called the police. And so when we got back there, the police weren't there, but they were like, "Look, we're taking all the shit that you took," and they gave our names to police. And about 2 weeks after that, my dad's house got raided, and they found a lot of stolen property, a lot of other bits and pieces, and that was my first ever charge. It was 54 break and enters and a heap of drug paraphernalia and things like that. So once again, sorry, I'll jump back there a second. So 16 years old through to 18. I was sort of in and out of court a little bit here and there for like driving charges. Like I never actually really got my license. I lost my learner license. Like, so when you're over here in Australia, you go from like your learners and then you go onto your P plates, which is like provisionary, and then you get your open license. And so from like 16 through to like 18 or 19, you're on your Ps and then you get your open license. So I lost my license when I was on my learners because you're meant to have an adult driving with you or someone that has an open license. And I got caught multiple times just driving around with no license, right? Obviously on my learners. And so I actually had an outstanding driving charge that was going through court. But because of the life that I created for myself, that's the last thing I was thinking about, right? I was just thinking about who can I sell this shit to? Who can I smoke this shit with? Where can I get more of this drug? That was literally my whole life. And so I completely forgot about court. I was already on a suspended sentence for previous charges. It was, I think, yeah, 20 years old. I was living in a suburb in Brisbane called Sherwood, not the greatest area. And I remember just getting a knock at the door. And I'm like, I had this feeling about this, right? I had this feeling about this knock, like something's going on here. I open the door and boom, there's detectives, two of them. And they say, "You Benjamin Lowe?" And I say, "Yes." I say, "Well, we've got a return to prison warrant for you because you haven't shown up to court. And I had no idea. I literally had zero idea that I hadn't been to court or that I even had a court date at this point. And so I got taken to jail for the first time. And see, with prison, I'm not too sure if it's the same over there, but with prison over here, everyone, no matter what you've done, you could be a murderer, you could be in there for drugs, you could be in there for a driving charge, you could be in there for fraud. Everyone gets put into the same place to start with. And so you can imagine like all these guys talking about this crazy shit that they've done. And then here's me going, oh yeah, I'm in here for a driving charge. Right. And as far as it goes in the criminal world, I felt about this big because I'm pretty much in here for the most childish thing you possibly could be.
Mm,
Right. So yeah, that was my first experience with prison. You'd think that, going to prison for the first time would be enough for me to go, okay, well, maybe I need to make a change here. Because once again, I came from a good family. I had a good education. I had a head on my shoulders. But here I am in prison. And the only thing I could think about is, once again, the entrepreneur. Okay, so he gets it for this much and I get it for this much. Maybe I can get some off him and sell it to this guy that I just met and I can make more money. And so for me, it was only 4 weeks. I was in prison the first time before I got released on bail. But for me, this just became an opportunity for me to connect, to network. And for anyone that's been to prison in Australia, like it really is just that. There is no rehabilitation in prison. You're surrounded by junkies, thieves, people that are doing the same shit. It's a pissing contest. It's very egotistic. I was doing this, she was doing that, like whatever it might be. Everyone's trying to one up each other. And so you get out of jail, or I got out of jail, and I thought to myself, all right, well, how can I step this up so the next time I go in, I've got better stories to tell? That was literally my thought pattern. That's where my life was at.
mm,
Right?
mm,
Crazy, right? Like the thing that I was most excited about was the fact that I could get out and now get my drugs cheaper and make more money.
mm,
So that was the first time at 20. Over the next 6 years, I was locked up another 5 times. So a total of 6 times, right? Across 6 years. I spent 4 years in prison in total. Longest time being a year and a half, which was for a large amount of methamphetamine. And during this time, I had so many wake up calls, like so many opportunities to make a change. Number one, going to prison, probably the first one, right? And I'm a firm believer that we get, tickled with a feather, we get slapped in the face, or we get hit by a Mack truck. And I had multiple Mack truck moments. There was a point in time across that 6 years there where I was in 3 car accidents. Okay. One of them, I was asleep in the passenger seat and my mate flipped his WRX down about 120 and we were flipping end over end. I had no seatbelt on. I ended up getting thrown out the window, well, not completely, but my arm was hanging out the window and then back over the back seat. And I've still got like a scar. The only mark I have on my body from that accident, which is like a scar. It's fabric burned from the seat, the upholstery of the actual WRX seat, right? And I walked away from that without a scratch. A week later, 2 or 3 days later, I was with my partner at the time. Once again, at this point in time, I also forgot to mention I'm on the run from the police, right? So this is like I'm on the run. I was up in Brisbane and my partner was driving one of those old Mercedes sort of cars and those things are built like tanks. And boom, we just get T-boned because we haven't been to sleep for a few days and she just pulls out across traffic. We get T-boned. All right. Once again, walked away without a scratch. Had to get out of there because obviously police, all that sort of stuff. Had to get away from the situation. And then only a couple of days later, I was, let's say 100 kilometers away, almost hiding out, if you like, in a place in New South Wales. And I was driving this little Toyota Camry down this dirt road. And here I am, like 2 or 3 days not sleeping. And I thought it'd be fun to start ripping the handbrake down this dirt road. And I was trying to link this corner. It was like a hairpin corner. And on the other side of this hairpin, right? So you go around this sort of berm. And then there was like a drop off, right? Into like a paddock. It was like 100-meter drop and there was trees just like stopping it. And I literally tried to link this corner. I went into it, ripped the handbrake. And with a front wheel drive car, there's no chance you're getting out of that corner if you're already like locked up, right? And so I literally just pointed the car off the cliff and ended up off the cliff. And if you imagine this car was like, when a duck bobs underwater and the tail's just sticking up, I was stuck in trees looking down over like 100-meter drop, right? Luckily, none of these trees pierced me or nothing came through the windshield. And I had to literally climb up over the back seat, kick the back window out, which was smashed, and then climb out over the car. And this happened in the space of a week. That was the first real moment now that I can recollect, right? At the time, I thought it was great. I'm like, hey, look at me, I'm still alive. A little bit later on down the track, right? Obviously, a couple more times in jail, a little bit later on down the track, and I had some issues with some bikies. I was hanging around them a little bit, doing a little business with them, all that sort of stuff. And they asked me to come with them and actually join them. And I said that it wasn't for me. And they pretty much just turned on me. Pretty much at that point in time, I became attack on sight. So anytime that any of this gang would see me out in public, they just attack me. And so there's 2 or 3 occasions where I was literally out with a partner or I was just walking home from work or something like that, and boom, getting hit from behind or jumped by 3 or 4 of them or anything like that, right? And this went on for like a matter of months. I was literally scared to leave my house. You think that would be enough for me to go, well, enough's enough, right? But it wasn't. And there's 2 last real turning points for me. One of them was I was in prison for the last time. So after all that happened, I was in prison again. And this is my longest time being locked up. I was in there for a year and a half. And I remember looking around, and where I was at that time in the prison was in the reception wing. So I was working there. I had a job there. It was probably one of the best units because it wasn't as heavy as a lot of the other ones. It wasn't as many politics. Plus, also, everyone coming off the street would always have bits and pieces. They might have smokes. They might have drugs. They might have whatever it might be. I didn't really get into the drugs in jail, but obviously you get sort of first pick of what's coming in. And I remember sitting there, and it was like about a year into my sentence. And I was looking around, and I'm like, I've seen that guy before. I've seen him before, and that guy's coming in before as well. And I thought, look at these fucking losers. Look at these fucking losers. They are in and out of prison. They've been here 2 or 3 times this year. And the penny really dropped for me then. And I realized that I was that fucking loser.
Mm.
I realized that was me. I realized that I was that same guy that was in and out of prison, that was wasting his life, that was doing nothing with it. And so I made a decision then to make a change. And so I got out of prison and I started to become a personal trainer, but things didn't change straight away. I still needed to be able to support myself. So I went straight back to the drug trade. And not too long after getting out, I got into an altercation with someone, which ended up with me with a 410 shotgun put down my throat. Right. I watched him cock it, put a bullet in it, put it down my throat. And for anyone that doesn't know what a 410 shotgun is, it's a very, very old, almost like a musket looking pirate gun. This thing was sawn off as well. Right. And it's got a little
Oof.
hammer on the back. Okay. And all it takes is for someone to tap that the wrong way and that hammer can pop. And this same guy is not the kind of person you want to fuck with. This is someone that I was actually scared of because of the things that he'd been charged with, the things that he'd done in his life. And at that moment, I knew that I had to make a change. So not too long after that, I left the mother of my kid. Now she was pregnant with my son at the time, but I knew that if I didn't walk away from that, if I didn't get away from that life, because she was still tied up in that to some degree, that nothing was going to change for me. And that to me is still one of the decisions that I hold the most shame and guilt around. However, I have dealt with that, but I was a piece of shit. I was a piece of shit. I didn't just leave her. Okay. I left her for another woman because I was too weak to be by myself. I was too less of a man to walk away from a relationship without having someone else to walk into. And so that was who I was. That's who I was back then. And so at the age of 26, I walked away from absolutely everything that I'd known for the last 10, 15 years. Last 10 or 11 years. And I had to really reinvent myself. The thing is, I'd been to psychology. I'd, tried the meetings. I'd tried just stopping and white knuckling it before, but the thing was that my why wasn't big enough. My why wasn't big enough to make a change. And so at that point moving forward, I said that I'd never go back to at least smoking meth. And I had a good break from everything else as well. However, this is the problem that I see, and this is something that we'll talk into as well, is what will happen a lot of the time is, and this is the issue that I see with a lot of the traditional therapies and treatments when it comes to drug and alcohol abuse, AA, NA, psychology, counseling, a lot of rehab centers as well. Yes. Let's just use rehab as an example, right? If you take a man out of the environment where he is using drugs and away from all the things that trigger him, then of course he's going to be able to get sober, right? However, if you don't address the deeper underlying issues, in other words, the reason that he was using drugs, because drugs and alcohol are never the actual problem, they're only ever a symptom, or if you like, a solution, right? They're a solution that's become maladaptive and at one point in your life worked, just like alcohol did for me at 13 years old. It was a way for me to avoid my emotions, but then it caused a lot more damage as well. And until I was actually able to address the deeper underlying issues, I just went from addiction to addiction. And this is the problem with the traditional methods. A lot of them will only actually treat the symptom rather than getting to the source. And this is why so many men will go, and this is a conversation I have almost every single day. I've been to AA, I've been to NA, I've been to psychology and counseling, I've done rehab, but I'm still stuck in this pattern. And it's because you can remove the symptom. Yeah, that's fine. But that's like trying to put a band-aid on a bullet hole. You're still going to bleed out. And what will happen is, yes, you might get rid of the meth, let's say, but then you pick something else up instead, which is exactly what I did. And as a personal trainer at this point in my life, this is my first real job or first real business since being a burger flipper at McDonald's. What were all the other PTs doing? Well, every weekend they'd be out partying. They'd get on the cocaine. They'd be drinking. They'd be sleeping with as many girls as they possibly could. And here I am having to leave my entire identity for the last 11 years behind after inventing who I'd been and having some kind of sense of power, some sense of belonging, some sense of status. And I had to leave all that behind. So what I did was I latched on to the first people that I could find. I was like, well, it looks like they have a pretty good life. But these are the people that were using drugs. These are the people that were drinking. These are the people that were talking about health and fitness all week. And then come the weekend, not practicing what they preach. And
Mm.
so that for me was, a big realization as well, because I went through another 4 years then, another 4 years. So 26 to 30 of partying, snorting cocaine, using MDMA, anything that I could to get to the weekend and then not have to sit with myself. Because what I found was that from everything that had taken place over the last 11 years, even though I couldn't physically remember it all, my body could remember absolutely everything. Right? There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Right? I'm actually seeing him
Mhm.
next week after. He's doing a tour, and so I'm going to be seeing him. Pretty cool. Pretty excited for that. However, the body always remembers everything. Every little bit of shame that I'd had, every bit of, anything that I'd done which went against my morals or my values, anything that wasn't in alignment with who I was. And every time I'd been out of integrity, every time I'd ripped someone off, every time I'd been ripped off, all these things, right? And so every time that I'd not be working or not be around people or be with myself, if you like, the head wounds would get really loud, and I had to avoid that. I had to avoid that at all costs because I still didn't have the tools to deal with it. And so another 4 years passed by. And at this point in time, I've got a 4-year-old son who I have barely anything to do with. For the first 6 months of his life, I had nothing to do with him. Nothing. I didn't
Mm.
see him. I wasn't there for the birth. Once again, one of these things that I still judge myself for a lot, but I'm open to speak about it because the thing is, I've been there. Like, I get it. For a lot of men, they hold shame around things like this, but you can come back from that. And that's why I speak about this, right? I wasn't there for the birth of my son. I wasn't there for the first 4 years, really. I'd see him maybe once a week, once a fortnight. And during that time, I'd still be distracted because my whole life revolved around, once again, making money as a PT. So I'd always be on my phone, or chasing women. So I'd always be on Tinder, or trying to find out where the party was on the weekend, or coming down from the party. So I wasn't a present father. I wasn't a good man. I was a terrible leader. I was completely out of integrity with who I wanted to be. I remember being a young man and saying to myself, promising myself that I'd never end up the same as my father. Yet the problem was with what I was doing at the time, I was actually so much worse. And that was
Mhm.
another realization for me. And so the real big penny drop moment for me, where I finally gave all of that up and decided to become the man that I am today, was about 4 years ago. It was the 2nd of January, 2022. And I remember waking up and looking in the mirror. I remember just climbing out of bed. It was the 2nd of January. I've been on a 4-day bender or a 3-day bender before that. I remember just like crawling out of bed and just sort of like opening the sliding door into my bathroom and just grabbing onto the bathroom basin with both hands and just looking at myself. When you've like drunk so much that the whole world is spinning, right? The whole
Mhm.
world spinning. And that was what was happening. I was still completely intoxicated. I remember grabbing the basin, right? And just trying to stabilize myself and looking in the mirror. And when I looked up, I had a black eye, and I remember things started to flash back, right? I had a black eye from punching off my housemate. I punched off my housemate over something so stupid, right? Because I was being a dickhead. I had crashed my brand new ute into the front fence of my house. This is a brand new ute I've just bought after not having a license for 11 years. I bought this ute to celebrate, if you like, to celebrate that I'd made a change. I crashed it into the front fence of my rental property, by the way. And the night before, I'd been at a very extravagant party, or the day before on New Year's Day. There was a massive New Year's Day party at actually one of my clients that I sold drugs to at his house. I remember being there with these like CEOs, executives, all these high level people. And I started thinking back to what had actually taken place. And I remember just being an absolute cock. Like I was jumping on his couch. I was snorting lines off the DJ decks. I was just making an absolute mess of myself. And it struck me that this wasn't an isolated experience. This was the sort of shit that I was doing every single weekend. And I knew at that point that something had to change. I had a 4-year-old son growing up without a father. I was not practicing what I preached when it came to my business. I had a personal training business, right? There were times when I'd literally be upstairs, hungover in bed on a Monday morning, and I'd open my garage because I had a home gym. I'd open my garage and tell my clients that I was sick, right? I was full of shit. And I wondered why my business wasn't doing too well. And there were just so many little indiscrepancies in my life. All my relationships would always go to shit, and it was always their fault. I'd blame them. And what I'd do after that was soothe myself with drugs, with alcohol, with any woman that was dumb enough to buy my bullshit enough to let me sleep with her. And I knew that something had to change. So
Mm.
on the 2nd of January, on 2020, started 75 Hard. At the end of
Oh,
75 Hard, I had my first boxing fight. Not too long after that, I started learning to skydive. And what I started to do was I replaced my addictions with challenging myself. Because when you're in addiction, in active addiction, your self-worth is so low. You feel like you're, and I'll talk for myself here, but I know that anyone out there that's struggling with addiction can relate. You feel like you're about this big. And the only way for you to feel any good or bring yourself back to baseline is to use the substance that you're stuck in or to find something that make you feel nothing at all. And so I
mm,
started to challenge myself. And the reason for that was I wanted to challenge myself to prove to myself how capable and how worthy I was. And so I just kept doing these things, kept doing these things. And it wasn't a smooth cut road, right? I'd go sober for 2 or 3 months and I'd get on a fucking bender. I'd be sober for another 2 or 3 months. Then I'd go to Europe for 6 weeks and wouldn't stop drinking or taking drugs for the whole entire time I was there. And I'd get back, I'd have a fight, and then I'd get drunk, start drinking again or whatever it might be. I had like 4 boxing fights during this period. And every time after I had a fight, I'd start drinking again. So it was 3 years ago, right? When I actually made the decision to get completely sober. So 3 years ago, what I wanted to do was wanted to see if I could do this for a year. So I set a commitment to get sober completely for a year. And I did that. And what I noticed was that everything was better. Now, the first few months were really, really hard. I had to really reinvent myself again. But going through everything that I went through, what I started to realize was that the substance was never the problem. The drugs and alcohol were never the problem. All the things that I was doing to fulfill my needs weren't the problem. The problem was that I had zero self worth. And from a very young age, 13 years old, I decided that I was worth nothing. And the only time for me to work, only reason or only way for me to be worth anything was if I was selling drugs, if I was performing, if I was going above and beyond. And it was all coming through ego. So I guess that's the short version, but that's what got me to where I am today.
mm,
And I understood because I'd tried all the traditional methods like psychology, counseling, therapy, all that sort of stuff, AA, NA, whatever it might be. And none of it worked because yes, I'd get sober, but then I'd swap it out for something else. Or I'd change drugs or I'd do really good for 3 or 4 months. And this is the same story I have with so many men that I work with. And I have these conversations every single day. I was doing so well, but, you know, and until we learn to deal with life in a different way, nothing will ever change. Because the
mhm,
problem that I pretty much all the men that I work with is that we get taught or we teach ourselves that there's one way to deal with everything. We might use cocaine when we have a good day. We might use cocaine when we have a bad day. We might use cocaine when we have a sad day. But either way, there's one answer to everything. When we're celebrating, what we drink. When we have a bad day, what do? We drink. And this is a lot of the culture that we grow up in, right? We see this growing up.
yeah.
And so it's no wonder that when shit gets hard in life, what do? We turn to the first thing that we know will take that pain away temporarily.
Mm, mm. There's so much to unpack there. I don't even know where to start. I mean, you were in prison 6 times, 3 different times you were in a car wreck. There's so many layers that I don't even really know where to begin, but here's one of the things that I think I resonate with the most. And I just put up a reel on my page, and the reel is simply this: you can spend thousands of dollars. What is it called in Australia? Is it called dollars or is it called something different?
Yeah, it's
Called
dollars, but
dollars?
they might as well be Australian pesos with the way the dollar's trending at the moment.
Okay. So you can spend thousands of dollars in counseling and therapy. You can spend hundreds of hours sitting in a counselor's chair or laying on a therapist's couch. But yet, if you're unwilling to deal with the underlying roots, if you're unwilling to deal with the underlying issues, counseling and therapy are going to do no good. And I think that one of the problems that I find with them is that they for or they keep you stuck in a place where you simply talk about your feelings, you talk about your thoughts, you talk about your emotions, you talk about maybe how you were hurt, how somebody wounded you, you talk about all these different things, but you don't really take the time to understand the patterns, the mindsets, what's really going on inside. And like you said with addiction, addiction isn't really the underlying issue. It's a symptom, it's a solution. And I've had conversations with former drug addicts, I've had conversations with former alcoholics, and what they say, every single one of them, including yourself, says it is the symptom, it is not the root. And I had a
Yeah.
conversation with someone last year, and he said something that really stuck with me. And he said, until the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, nothing in your life will change. Your environment won't change, your situation won't change, your circumstances won't change, you won't change. And then he went on to say something else. He says, people would prefer a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven, right? It's like this Stockholm syndrome where we, like you said, you kept finding, and I think that's ultimately a way to understand relapse is basically some sort of form of Stockholm syndrome where you just continually go back to what provided you with temporary relief. And I want to highlight the word temporary because there's a reason why it's called the high, right? I mean, every high must eventually go low, and how high it usually lasts, that I don't know. I've never done drugs. I've never smoked. I've never been in a position where you are. But one thing I'm learning is that the human condition is very much the same. And we all operate with some core needs. We all operate with some core wants and desires. And you touched on it. And that is our self worth. That is
Correct.
our value. That is our identity. And someone asked me a few weeks ago, he asked me a very pointed, powerful question. And he said, how different would your life be if you started understanding your worth and that you had value?
I love that.
How would
Um,
how would your life different? How would your choices be different? How would you live if you started understanding who you really are? And I think that's something that a lot of men, and that's primarily my audience is men, but I think that's something that a lot of men today struggle with. And I think it's ingrained in us, like you said, from a young age, because I had a very different background from you. I grew up in the church. I grew up in a minister's home. So you talked about your mom being kind of sheltered. I lived the embodiment of a sheltered life, never did drugs. Never drank. I didn't have my first drink until I was 21 when I celebrated my fiance's birthday at the time. That was the first time I had drink. It was also the very first time I had sex was when I was 21. So it was kind of like I celebrated both at the same time. But the interesting thing about it is I still found myself going through life performing. I still found myself going through life people pleasing. I still found myself going through life chasing after attention and affirmation and approval and applause and accolades. And you don't realize how significant events are in your life that ultimately bring you to the place where you are looking for anything that will provide you any type of relief,
yeah.
provide you any type of rest. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing in their lives. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think one of the greatest things that's missing in a lot of men's lives right now, two things, and I think they may be two sides of the same coin. And I would say it's simply rest and peace. A lot of men just don't have peace. And peace is not based on external circumstances. It's not based on external situation. It's this inward reality that you have. And I think a lot of men just don't have peace. They don't have peace with themselves. They don't have peace with other people. They don't have rest. They don't have the ability to regulate themselves. They can't regulate their nervous system. They can't regulate their emotions. They can't regulate at all. And as a result, they're either ticking time bombs, waiting to go off and waiting to explode at any point in time, or they're chasing the next high. And
Correct. Yeah, yeah, for
there's a
sure.
there's a lot of men that self-sabotage, and I know I've done it so many times, and that's why I can appreciate your story. And so the more I hear you talk in my head and I replay some of the things that you said, the question that I have is, what was the greatest thing that you needed to overcome? Because I understand your story about that penny drop, that moment in your life when you finally made the decision, listen, enough is enough, this has to change. But what was the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle, the biggest challenge or obstacle that you had to overcome in order for you to finally make a difference once and for all? I can't go on living like this anymore.
I'm gonna rewind for a second because I think two things that you said there were around obviously things that men are missing. One of them was being peace. What was the other one? Peace and
Rest.
rest. So I want to add something to that, something that I think that all men, or not all men, but most men that get stuck in these cycles are missing, and it's going to be self-worth and purpose.
Mm,
Because the man with true purpose, with true direction and true self-worth knows who he is, number one. But number two is striving towards something bigger. So rest is no longer something that he needs as much. It's more so about then having that inner peace because he knows what he's working towards, right? But that then brings me to this next section, which you just asked me, like, what was the biggest thing I had to overcome? It was myself. It was the inner dialogue and my lack of self worth, which kept telling me that I'd never be anything more than a drug dealer, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't valid of, the biggest thing that I had to overcome was the internal dialogue within me. And this is still something that plays out to this day because I spent, you know, let's call it for the best part of 26 years, just going through life and just dragging through running the same old story. Yes, at 26, I did start making changes, but then until I was about 30, I was still doing the same shit. I didn't realize that self worth was the issue, and so it's only been now 4 years that I've been trying to rewrite these programs. This is not just the biggest thing I had to overcome, but it's still the biggest thing that I and anyone that's on this, on this journey is going to have to overcome. It's self worth because self worth just doesn't just correspond to how I feel about myself. It's also
mm,
how I see. It's identity.
yeah.
And I created this identity of being this hotshot drug dealer. I had as much money as I wanted. Like at one point there, before I went through prison the last time, I counted $600,000 in my lounge room. I bought a duffel bag into the house and dropped it on the floorboards, and it fucking made the house shake. Like I had the money, I had all the things that people think bring you that enoughness, but it never did. I had the cars, I had the girls, I had a nice Rolex, I had nice clothes. I could walk into the mall and buy whatever I wanted. I'd drop a stack of cash. It was no problem, but I was still so unfulfilled. And so the biggest thing that I had to overcome was number one, understanding that nothing external to me would ever bring me happiness. And number two, really reshaping my identity and really forging myself as the father, the partner, and the leader that I am now.
Mm,
And don't get me wrong, like there's still days where I feel fucking weak. There's still days where I don't
yeah.
want to get out of bed, where I don't feel worthy of this, but it's the internal battle, which is definitely the biggest thing because all the external shit's easy. It's easy. It's easy, right? Oh, I shouldn't say easy. It's simple. All the external shit's simple, right? As you said, just remove yourself from the environment. Quickest way to create a change. But the thing is, you can take the boy out of the environment, but you can't take the environment out of the boy. What you've grown up in, the environment you've grown up in, then becomes who you are. We don't adapt the environment. We adapt to the environment. We then take that on as our identity. And so I've had to spend however long it is now rewriting and unwiring and firing and wiring new pathways in the brain to become the man that I am. That's been the hardest thing, bro. The most challenging
Mm,
thing. Really sitting with self and figuring out who the fuck I am.
mm. You know what the biggest
Does
question
that
that I
answer your question? I
yeah,
think it
it
did.
does. It does. It answers it in so many different ways, and I appreciate you answering that. But you know what? You know what's interesting is I'm listening to you talk, and you've talked about this 4 year window where you're experiencing change, you're experiencing transformation, you're experiencing growth, you're understanding your purpose. You talked about AA and NA and therapy and recovery, and you described what you had to overcome in order to get to where you are right now. But one of the things that we've talked about relapse, and that's simply just going back to, let me make it very clear to anybody that would listen to this. Relapse doesn't just necessarily correlate or correspond to drugs or alcohol. Relapse can be mindsets, behaviors, patterns, environments, relationships. You can relapse into anything. And I want to make people understand that you may not have struggled with drugs, you may not have struggled with alcohol, but maybe it was porn for you, or maybe it was a toxic environment, or maybe it was an abusive relationship. You can relapse. Whatever you go back to for some type of worth or validation that ends up doing the exact opposite is in all reality a form of relapse, and it is so easy to do. So I want to remove the stigma that is attached with the word relapse, because I think we do ourselves a disservice to a lot of people that don't have the story that you have, but they are still just as guilty of relapsing, and they're unwilling to get unstuck. They're unwilling to come out of that place simply because they don't understand it. And so the reason why I even talk about relapse is because you have spent 4 years of your life rewiring yourself. You've spent 4 years of your life maybe reinventing yourself and maybe redefining your purpose and redefining your identity. So what is it for you that has allowed this change to stick? What do you have to do on a daily basis to keep yourself from going back? Because I think you would admit, you said it yourself, that there's moments, there's days that when you feel weak, you don't feel like getting out of bed. So what is it that you do to make sure that you don't actually go back to the same patterns, behaviors, addictions that you've spent so much time overcoming?
So, two things. First, my purpose and my why. And the second is my structure. Okay. Structure, my routine, the things that I do every single day. So, like we spoke about before, there's identity. Now, there's the identity of who I once was, and there's the identity of who I am now. This part of me is always going to be a part of me. That's who I was. It's not going anywhere. That's the ego that was trying to keep me safe. Ego, people think ego is inherently bad. It's not. Our ego, right, is our identity, or a part of ourself is trying to protect us from harm. It's trying to
Yeah.
keep us safe.
Yeah.
And so this part's always going to still be there, right? Because that's who I had to be at that point in my life. But there's also a certain amount of actions, decisions, choices, habits, behaviors that make me this person. So to
Yeah.
create this is the thing, right? Because once again, we spoke about if you are struggling with drugs and alcohol, if you're struggling with porn, it doesn't matter what you're struggling with. Either way, there's a certain amount or a certain level of actions, habits, behaviors, choices, and decisions that are keeping you where you are. And so every single day, I have to wake up and make a choice, decision, action, and put behaviors in place and have habits that move me further away from this person and move me closer towards the man that I want to be. So first things first, obviously purpose, like your why has to be big enough. My why is to number one, be, and this is the first part of it, right? To be the father, partner, and leader that my family deserve. But then even furthermore than that is to be the father, partner, and leader that the men in my community deserve. So I can show them the way. That's the biggest part for me, right? To inspire other men to become the father, partner, leader their family deserve. That's why I do what I do. That's why I get out of bed every single fucking day. And it's not because of the men. It's nothing to do with them. It's because I think about my kid who was growing up without a father, right? My son who was growing up without a father. And I know that by just having an impact in the life of one man, it's going to impact the lives of many, their partners, their kids, their co-workers, their colleagues, their family, every single person around them. It has a ripple effect on them. It's not even about the men. I shouldn't say I don't care about them, but I do. I do
Right.
care about them a lot. I care about every single one of them that I work with. I love them all because they're doing the work, but it's more so about the ripple effect that they're going to have on their family, and then being able to carry that down, not just to this generation, but to the generations after that, to create a global change. That's what this is all about. Right? That's my why. That's my purpose. That's why I wake up every single fucking day and get so excited, even if it means I'm just sitting in front of the computer pushing keys. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Right.
Right? Because I get to be who I never had. Yeah. But the second
Yeah.
part of that is routine, right? Identity, because this is the identity of who I used to be, right? And it was low self worth. It was lying in bed feeling sorry for myself. It was doing everything that I could to make myself feel good temporarily. It was all about
Mm,
instant gratification. And so now I have to have a set of rules for myself or a set of things that I do every single day that help me to become the man that I am becoming. Because people think that you just become the man. They think that who I am today, I just became him. No, I thought about who I wanted to be, and I'm still thinking about who I want to be, and I'm acting in alignment with that every single fucking day. I'm a man of integrity. When I say this is who I am, that means that I get up on my first alarm. That means that I go to the gym. That means that I do cold exposure. That means whatever it might be. I journal every morning. That means I check in with my partner. I spend time with myself first. I've got a certain level of rules that I need to complete every single day for me to be the man that I am, because otherwise I know that I'm going to slowly start to slip back to who I was. Now, it's funny you mentioned about relapses because I had one not too long ago, not with drugs and alcohol, but with behaviors and decisions and choices. About
mm,
2 months last year, my business took the forefront of everything that I was doing. That meant that I lost touch with my family, my partner, my relationship, and myself. And so there was about 2 or 3 months there where I just didn't go to the gym because my priorities became the wrong thing. Instead of being about service and impact, it became about money.
mm,
And because it became about money, my highest value at the time was money. That meant that my health, my family, my relationship, my integrity all took a back seat.
mm,
And this is something that I think is really important to touch on is like looking at what your level of values are. So for the men that are listening to this, that are trying to make change, a lot of them will probably say that family is the most important thing. Family is the most important thing. Well, the thing that I needed to change was not just talking about it, but being about it and making sure that if my family is the most important thing, my actions, my choices, my decisions, my behaviors, and everything that I do every single day aligns with that. Because that's
mm,
what it truly means to be a leader. That's what it truly means to be a man of integrity. So we throw that
mm,
word around like it's nothing. But integrity means number one, being a man of your word, doing the things you say you're going to do. Not just the big things, but the small things as well. Like if you say you're going to be that man for your family, being that man. If you say you're going to be that man for your kids, being that man. If you say you're going to stop fucking drinking, if you say you're going to stop drinking, just full stop, and you go back to it after 3 weeks and justify it to yourself because you did well for 3 weeks, you're still lacking integrity, brother. You're still fucking lacking integrity. But the most important thing about being a man of integrity is understanding what your values are and living in alignment with that every day, every single day. So that sometimes means, like you said, not being a people pleaser, right? It means saying no to things that don't align with what you're working towards or who you are. It means saying yes to the things you want to do, not the things that you feel like you have to do.
mm,
So, again, touching back on what we're just speaking about there, the two biggest things, like I said, were purpose, understanding my why, and number two, the routine, the habits, the change of identity. And that's still something I have to practice every single fucking day because I've got 26 years. Let's really call it 30 years, okay? 30 years. Because I was still doing shit behaviors for up until about 4 years ago. I had 30 years of shit behavior, of firing and wiring on my brain that wasn't serving me long term. That's not going to be
mm.
overcome in seconds, 30 minutes. Shit. It's not going to be overcome in 4 years. As I said before, I can easily slip back into old patterns and behaviors if I don't think about who I am, right? And actually show up as that man every single day.
You know what? I think that helps explain some of your more recent reels, especially working to provide the home and everything. I think now I have an understanding of why some of those more recent reels are on your page based on what you just talked about as far as relapse, because it gives more clarity. And I love the content that you have because I want to two more things that I just want to build on because I think they're incredibly important.
Thank you, bro. I
One of
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. One of the things that I have come to learn is whatever you don't transform, you will transmit. And if you don't transform your trauma, if you don't transform your addictions, if you, what, and let me say it this way, whatever you don't overcome, you will inevitably pass down. And you did a reel where it was the little boy that said, "You're an effing retard." And the real, like, where did he get it from? It wasn't because he was bullied. It was learned behavior that he saw in the house. And
Yes.
I really want to touch on that because I think a lot of people don't. More is taught than taught. More is observed and watched than what is actually heard
So
from
much.
your lips. And this is a lesson that I have learned more recently where I have watched this play out very, very close to me where I it's very easy to shift blame and to put the blame where it doesn't belong when it comes to behaviors, regardless of boy or girl, because they learn this behavior in the home and they will parrot, they will model exactly what they see inside of the home. I think that is why it's so important for us to recognize. I don't have kids, but it's why I think I've come to understand. And you talked about legacy and what is the example that we are passing on to those that are underneath us, but also those that are walking alongside of us. You talked about your kids, and then you talked about the community that is around you. Ben, one of the things that I am learning more than anything, and this is the underlying reason why I have started these conversations. It's the underlying reason why I am even on with someone like yourself. It's why I've created my page. It's why I do what I do. It's because I understand the importance of community. I understand the importance of brotherhood. I do not believe that you can fully understand your identity outside of community. I think we need brothers to help us to understand our identity and understand our purpose and walk with us and walk beside us. I think it's something that is so incredibly, and one of my favorite shows is Sons of Anarchy. I don't know if you've ever watched Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah,
It's one of
I've seen
it's
it, bro.
it's one of my favorite shows. Now, of course, what they did in that show is obviously a lot of stuff that you overcome. Band of brothers. And Ben, the final thing that I want to touch on is the importance of community, the importance of having men and brothers that are around you that can help not only keep you accountable, but can also help keep you responsible.
Most definitely, bro. Most definitely. I think it's so important. Just as we going through life, if we're isolated and alone, it can be very easy because you now know you haven't got anyone to reflect anything back to you. This is why so many men they do all this work and they get into a relationship, and then all of a sudden it's like all these things come up because if you haven't got brothers around you, they're going to be 100% honest with you. Like most of our friends will tell us what we want to fucking hear, and that's not doing us any service, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Where when you come to a partner, then it's the same thing, right? And if you got the same patterns playing out in your relationships, here's a fucking newsflash for you, brother. You are the problem.
Mm,
At least part of it, right? And so this is why I love, brotherhood when you actually have staunch men, good men, not boys, but men around you who will call you out on your shit, who will challenge you, who will hold you to a higher standard than you've ever held yourself. Because it's easy for us just to cruise through life and do it alone. Yeah, that's right. We isolate, we shut down, whatever it might be. That's the fucking easy way out. I've said it. That's the fucking easy way out. Harder part about, or the hardest part is actually being able to voice what's going on, to be vulnerable, to be authentic, and be seen as you are. And that's the only way that we as men grow. And the only way to grow in that way is to be witnessed by other men. And so, what you're saying there about brotherhood and community is so fucking important. The people around you is, it will dictate who you become. And so if you're looking around right now as we say this and you're thinking about your friendship group and they validate everything that you say, even the shitty behaviors, and you know deep down within yourself that those aren't helping you get to where you want to go, it's time to find a new group, right? I call it weeding the garden. I had to do it multiple times in my life and I still have to do it, right? I'll run a
yeah,
course with a friend and I realize that this person is no longer providing value for me and they're actually pulling me down or keeping me stuck, or they're still living in the old ways. And I only had to do this recently with two people. And I call it weeding the garden, right? You got to pull the weeds out to see the flowers. And
yeah,
I'd much rather be surrounded by, a handful of men than have everyone around me telling me what I want to hear, but not actually telling me the truth. And I guess that's the beautiful thing about what we do at the New Age Man. And I guess the beautiful thing about that as well, I love the internet for this case. Man, I've got lots of men in Australia that I work with all around Australia. We've got guys in the UK, in Canada, in the US. Like, I'm coming to America in June, bro. We're coming across to a couple of places and going to be checking out like Texas and shit like that. And one of my boys is like, one of the guys I work with, he's like, we'll take you out on the boat, right? So we've got that brotherhood. We've got literally men all around the world who are on the same journey. And that's all you really need is you need to find a group of men who are on the
yeah,
same journey, on the same
yeah.
path, and have the same place they're heading to.
Mm,
Because the thing is, right, there's three stages of growth in life, I believe, right? There's dependence, which is when we're a little baby. Okay, you little baby, mum and daddy have to do everything for you. The problem is that so many men and women get stuck here. Now they're codependent. They need a partner to do things for them. They need, their mother's still in their life, especially for men. They become in that like sort of dynamic with their mother. They still need her to do everything for them. They become kiddos, right? A lot of men get
Yep.
stuck there. A lot of women get stuck there as well. Then you have independence. And this is where everyone thinks they need to get to, right? We even have this now with women, okay? Because there's so many men out there that are creating a lack of safety through the way that they're showing up. Women feel like they have to do it alone, right? And
Yeah.
I honestly am a firm believer that this is the reason there's so many feminists. This is the reason we have so many women who want to be in the corporate world as CEOs, as high performers. Like, down to their roots, they don't want to fucking be doing that shit. They want to be at home. They want to be hanging out with the kids. This is what we're born to do as men and women, polarity, right? Now, I'm not taking away that women can do what they want to do. That's great. But I think the reason we have so much of this now is because men have made it so unsafe, because so many of them are so unstable, because so many of them are not holding space for their women. They don't know how to emotion regulate. Like you said, they don't know how to show up as a man, because providing is not enough. You can't just put food on the table and think that's enough. That doesn't give you the right to go out and do whatever the fuck you want, sleep with hookers, snort cocaine, drink with the boys on the weekend. Not at all. What about your family at home, right? And this is why I think there honestly is so many women that feel like they have to be independent, because they do that from a place of safety. And this is a quick one just for anyone listening along. If you're in a relationship and all of a sudden your partner starts wanting to do things on her own, if your partner's starting to want to go on dinners by herself with her friends, she's not doing that because she's independent. She's doing that because she's creating a life for herself, because she's sick and tired of the life that you're providing for her. Simple. And this is what I see with so many of the men that I work with. They don't see the warning signs for their partner making the slow exit, because there will always be signs. But back to what I was saying, right? Independence. This is where so many people think they need to get to. And men get to this place and they go, I'm good, I can do it alone. But then shit hits the fan. They're stuck and they're like, well, fuck, this is hard. And so they turn to things like the drink, the bag, girls, whatever it might be. And this is where so many of us miss the point when it comes to development in life. It's about interdependence, not independence, interdependence. And interdependence is knowing that, yes, you've got this. Okay. You're so confident within yourself that, yeah, I've got this, but I also know that I don't have to do it alone. The ego doesn't tell me that I have to do it all myself. Right. And as a business owner, as a leader, as a father, even when you understand this and understand that you don't have to do it alone, and it's so much easier to ask for help. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong, right? Because it
Yeah.
gives you more capacity to do more in your life. When you understand this, this is where men really get that true growth. And this is what we develop in the New Age Man, is helping men to become interdependent and being able to rely on each other. Because every single one of the
Mm.
men that come to me, guess what? I say to them, we've got a brotherhood here. We're here to support you, whatever you need. And so many of them relapse and go, but I just don't know how to ask for help. We're here. You just need to reach out. But so many of them are still so scared to do it, because as men, we're taught not to. We're taught that vulnerability is weakness. Don't be a little bitch. You're better off doing it alone. You have to carry the weight of the world by yourself.
Yeah.
But it's not the case. It's not the
Mm.
case.
Mm.
So when it comes to the community aspect, I honestly think that is the one thing that so many of us are missing in the society we live in. Not missing, but a lot of us are missing that, having good community and good brotherhood around us, because that'll dictate the course of your life. Very simply put, because as human beings, we either fit in or we fuck off. Very simply
Yeah.
put, right?
Yep.
So if you're in a group right now and you're looking around, you're thinking to yourself, man, I've outgrown this. I'm the smartest man here. I feel like I'm giving more value than I'm getting. Like I said, maybe it's time to find a new community.
Could. And I am going to leave that as a cliffhanger for our next conversation. But for anyone who isn't familiar with Ben, go ahead and find him on Instagram, Ben Low Coaching. I follow him. I love his content. And so, Ben, thank you so much for your conversation and for your time. I appreciate you, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you so much for having me on, allowing me to share my story on your platform with your viewers. I really appreciate that. The other thing I want to say as well is, for anyone that is out there struggling with anything that I've spoken about, or you feel like you can resonate with my story, I'm still very active on my DMs. So, like Stephen said, Ben Low Coaching on Instagram, I do personally go through most of those messages. So if you message me, I will message back, and it'll be me that you're talking to. And I want to really highlight that, because I know in the digital age that we work, that we live in, it's so hard to get real connection online. Thank you again, brother.
Absolutely. Well, go check out Ben's page and go ahead and find your strength, find your courage, find what you need in order to become the man. And if you happen to be a woman that's watching this, you know what? You were designed to be the woman that you were created to be. And so I would encourage you. So, Ben, again, thank you so much for your time. And this will be a formal invitation and cliffhanger for part two. Stay tuned for when Ben and I go back at it again.
My man, appreciate it.